Today I want to talk about the effects of doing some hard pruning on really old stone fruit trees, particularly this plum here. And it's easily a 30-year-old plum tree, and a few years back, after being told that it had not been bearing fruit for quite a long time, I went ahead and came out here and made a few severe cuts. I didn't take off any large limbs that are in here, but I did go ahead and take some areas where I found lots of dead growth, and I went ahead and cut spots like that one up here. Also, you've got some smaller ones up there. We've got some cuts over here that I made as well, right here and here. You can also see where these larger wounds were made. We've got some dryness and some cracking coming in the middle of these spots, but we've also got this new growth trying to seal over this wound. That's why we cut at those branch collars, because this is already coming in on this. Even though this is a huge wound and might shorten the life expectancy of this tree, being a tree this old, it wasn't bearing fruit anyway. Taking off some of these larger branches that basically had no new wood growing on them anyway, we're not really losing much in those cuts. Any of these larger branches where I saw new growth coming in, I went ahead and took that as a sign to keep those portions of those limbs and just cut off anything further than that. And that way we could get some good growth. You can even see like this limb here, it was pretty strong. It was probably the strongest limb that was there when I did my pruning. And you can see how that's developed into its own kind of smaller mini tree up there. And it's looking really good because it's got some good life in the major limb up here. And that is sending off all those nutrients up into these upper branches off of here and doing really well. Other spots, it just helps take away some of that dead weight. And then we saw now that we're getting some new growth. A lot of this newer spindly growth here is because of the fact that now there's more energy, there's less stress on these branches, that they're actually pushing out these new water sprouts. I'm not going to do very much pruning today. It's in mid-September right now. Zone 7 looking at late October as our frost date. So I'm really not looking to do anything up in the top of this canopy today, but I will go ahead and do some pruning here on this trunk. And the trunk even itself looks pretty sad, but I mean, this isn't a tree for beauty, it's a tree for food. And while it's still got this much life in it, which really this is probably 2 or 3 times more filled out than I ever remember it being. And even with it suffering from whatever bugs or illness is causing the leaves to look in this way, even with that happening, it's still got a lot more leaves and a more thick canopy than it's ever had. After that initial pruning, that following year, it actually had fruit again, even though it hadn't bore fruit in several years. Birds got most of it, but it was still a sign that, hey, since we got some fruit, we can go ahead and put more time into this tree, because there's not much point in having a fruit tree if it doesn't give you shade or fruit. So really what I'm looking to do here today is get some of these branches that are here at the base. You can see some of them are a bit thicker, and that's because I'm actually trying to grow some new scaffold branches out of this tree that can bear fruit and be a good place for doing some grafting. And when you do severe pruning like I did, you get a pretty decent resurgence of growth. But especially those branches are what I want to focus on right now. We've got this one here coming out of the base. It's a bit tight of an angle, but it's not too bad. Mostly you need it to not be a sharp angle right where it comes out of the tree, because that's where you're going to get bark inclusion, and that's where you're going to have just a weak connection to the overall tree. It then comes up to this next branch here, and this one is just growing into the tree, and that's not helpful. And I see one bud here that we can go ahead and utilize. So I'm going to go ahead and snip here, and then hopefully that bud will send off a shoot out this way and have some fruit on it. And if that doesn't work, I can always take this off later. Then following up, we've got this next branch coming out, and that's what we want. We want these secondary scaffold branches coming out also away from the tree, but this one is not, it's growing right toward the tree. So we're going to take that off at that branch collar. And given that a lot of these leaves have fallen off and it's not the most healthy, there's a lot that we can't really see until spring, so I'm just gonna let it sit until then and only take away growth that I know I don't want regardless. By leaving a few extra branches here, whatever looks the best come spring, we can cut off everything else and just allow that growth, or we can snip certain spots so that the buds grow out a different way. And actually I will go ahead and do that. So looking at this branch right here, I can choose a bud coming out this way in order to get that growth to come out that way next. So that will at least pull it away from this in case we want to leave it for an extra length of time. The rest of this overall looks pretty good, except for this up here. We've got this one here that's growing straight up. I don't want that. Where we've got all these others that are growing laterally will be more likely to give us fruit. So I'm actually just going to clip off the top of that. So if you look at this branch now, all of this is growing away from the trunk and all of it's growing out and none of it is growing down. And that's really ideal for what we want for that new scaffold. We could in the future thin out these so that we don't have as many in a single cluster like that, but we'll leave that for another time since I really only want to get a small amount of material away because I don't want to drive a whole lot of new growth. Now let's look at this one here. We've got this branch here. I had actually put this piece of branch here in a previous year to spread it. And if I take that away, since it's been over a year since I've touched that, this is now stuck in that position like I wanted it to be. So if I wanted to push it down even further, I could get a tighter branch and get that further down. But I like it the way it is. I think that's going to work pretty well for us. But this water sprout here, I want to go, because we don't want that growth coming straight up. I could lean this out, but since it's so on the top, since it's on the top of this so much, I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out. If it were further to the side, I might leave it. And if I were looking for grafting material, that would actually probably be a decent piece if I were to cut it a different time of year, perhaps. Clean that up a little bit. We've got another one here coming off the side and then going straight up, getting into the way of some other branches here. So I'll get rid of that as well. This one is coming out of the side, but it's coming down enough that I like what it's doing here. So we'll allow that to stay, see what it does for us. And then going up further here, I've got this one going back toward the tree. So I want to get rid of that. And that's basically what I'm looking to do here, is just go ahead and clip any of those branches growing toward the tree and clearing those out. And hopefully in another year or two, we'll see actually some fruiting wood on here that we can look to get a crop from. Overall, I was thinking about keeping those because I thought maybe the rest of this tree was going to be a waste and need fully cut off some of these branches. But since it's actually put on as much growth as it has, I don't think I'll have to do that. But we can still go ahead and grow these out to have 2 sets of scaffold branches. And perhaps when these get larger, they'll take away enough nutrients from the top that we might need to cut those back. But we can take care of that when that comes up. No need to rush that process. So I'm just going to look for more of these growing back toward the tree and see if I can cut them like this. I've got a bud right here, so that'll come out. So I'll snip that above that bud, and that should do all right for us. Not really looking to limit the number of scaffolds down here either. Anything that looks good and in a spot that we don't have something else growing will work just fine. Because I'm not looking for beauty anymore on this tree. It's kind of lost that potential. But in a way, it kind of does have its own beauty. I also see we do have a vine growing up here as well. I just usually snip those vines in a few spots when we have those to make sure they don't compromise the tree. So I've finished up my pruning now. Got rid of most of the material that was in here, but I did leave quite a few backup pieces in here. And that's partly because I just want to make sure that those parts of the trunk stay alive. Because right now they for sure have these branches down here that are telling that part of the tree to stay alive and pull up that nutrients. And there is a lot of decay that I've found in looking down in here. So the longevity of this tree is probably going to be pretty low. And so I'm sure many of you are wondering, well, why even try with this? But honestly, there's plenty of space out here. We're not looking to put anything else here right now. And I've actually taken some of the saplings that grew from pits from this tree, and I've planted them out here as well. And I've got basically some backup trees out here. There's this plum, and then there's another one further in that thicket over there. And I took some of each type and planted them so those could grow. And so really there's no risk in trying this, and stone fruit only take a few years before they would bear on that wood. So there's a good chance that we would end up getting fruit out of this, and we already have gotten some fruit, we just didn't get to it in time. But there's no true loss in this. Now if you've got a very small backyard, maybe you wouldn't want to do this. But also, if you even have the small backyard and you're just then looking into getting a replacement tree, you might go ahead and keep that tree potted up for a while and grow it, and so that whenever this one would finally show signs of just imminent death, which I think this one has proven that it's got enough life left in it for now at least to keep it around. But you could be growing that replacement tree in a large container, and then whenever it came time to get rid of this tree, then you would already be ready with a replacement on hand to go ahead and put in that same location, or just slightly away from the old roots. But what you would be doing is lowering the amount of time that you are going without having a fruit-bearing tree. Since it does take a few years for even a stone fruit tree to come into bearing, you're then minimizing the amount of time that you're going to have to wait in order to get fruit. So you cut this like this while also getting that replacement tree if that's the route you want to go. But by doing this, you may get results like this where you get a lot of good vigorous growth that just shows that health is still in there enough to bear fruit. And also, in our specific circumstance, the soil here isn't very good. Topsoil was added here, but it only goes so deep. There's a lot of rocks, not a lot of nutrients. So this tree has been growing very slowly for a very long time, and that is actually even evidenced in how this lichen has been growing with the tree, because the tree hasn't grown quick enough to keep from growing that. That just means your tree's growing really slowly. It also can be a sign of decay, which obviously we have that here, but it doesn't mean you need to give up on the tree. So if you still like the variety, if you still like the fruit that you're getting from the tree, say it's worth a shot. Go ahead and get out there. Maybe even grab a few of the pieces of new growth and graft those to a rootstock so that you get an identical tree if that's something you really want. But until you have a tree that's ready to take its place, go ahead and give restoration a try. See what it does for you. Let us know your results. Also, to that end, that's why I have left a few of these rootstock suckers here. I've got just a few on the ground that I'm going to leave, let those grow up, and then those may not even be the variety that the tree is up top, but I can easily graft some of this new material that's coming up on these branches here. I can take that and I can graft it to those and cut down the tree if I choose to. But if you're trying to just reinvigorate that one tree, I would recommend taking out any of those suckers that come up, unless you just want to leave a few for insurance like I have here. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you don't give up on your fruit trees too easily. I'd say at least give them that extra year after you prune them back and see how they do. They might surprise you. Thanks for watching.